we have to settle down at lower levels because if you take a look at Europe, if you take a look elsewhere, you will see that there hasn't been a recovery in other markets, and I don't think we'll get one here.
Jeremy, let me throw a contrarian bullish outlook at you to see what you would make of it. As we watch what were remarkable services all over the country today, a rather inspiring, I must say, display of patriotism in this National Day of Mourning, is there in your judgment room here for some of the experts to be surprised and to see a positive outlook, an economy and a society in this country assert itself more positively, a stronger level of confidence rather than a weaker level of confidence?
It is really heartwarming to see how people have come together, and certainly that is the strength of America. But if we look back, there's no way that this can be positive economically for our country. And as a result, I know I've been hearing some things you have to be patriotic and buy. The problem is, you know, if people do that and then the market goes down later, they're going to feel very resentful because finally the level of the prices is going to be what the level of the economy and the earnings are, no matter really who buys and sells on Monday.
Jeremy Siegel, as always, good to have you with us.
Thank you very much, Lou.
Well, trading today did resume on the New York Mercantile Exchange, but not without some serious problems. Electronic trading did begin at 2:30 this afternoon Eastern Time. It was halted just moments later because as you would not be surprised, because of some technical problems. Light sweet crude oil soared more than 8% in those minutes of trading, gaining more than $2 a barrel. The action resumed again at 4 o'clock. It ended just minutes ago. We don't have an official close yet, but light sweet crude oil was higher, up again just about $2 as of about 15 minutes ago. Bonds today surged in price for the second straight day, and investors are continuing to look for a safe haven. Lisa Leiter in Chicago with that story. Lisa?
Lou, for the second straight day here at the Chicago Board of Trade, the mood was somber and trading was thin, but trading was orderly, and that's something that traders say was very important, and prices were much easier to come by than they were yesterday. And in the early going, the government went ahead and released regular new reports on retail sales, producer prices, and industrial production, although those reports went largely unnoticed in the bond market. Instead, here, traders spent a lot more time talking about their friends and colleagues in New York. They swapped survivor stories, and they showed their patriotism by hanging a pullout section from the Chicago Sun-Times with the American flag on it. Again today, Lou, like you said, investors sought the relative safety of short-term government debt. The two-year note surged with that yield falling to a historic low of 2.86%. Lou?
Lisa, thank you very much. Lisa Leiter from Chicago. And now joining me to give us some perspective on this bond market, and in particular the activity and what we can expect in the days ahead, Kathleen Hayes. Kathleen?
Well, you know, there have been so many interesting themes touched on, Lou. I really don't know where to start because I think there's two important themes coming out. How is the bond market functioning? And
I'm feeding.
Can you hear us? You've been here since really, yeah, Siani, I can.
Yes, I think that all of us who were out there on the plaza today can say that a lot of people just felt that they couldn't just sit around and continue to grieve. I mean, this is a way to sort of start the healing process by helping. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, absolutely. I certainly would agree with that. In fact, we're with a young man who has been here since real early this morning. What's your name?
Roger Schwartz.
Roger, and why did you decide you needed to come here?
I actually called Philly Cares a few days ago, and I said, yeah, I really want to help out with anything I can. They gave me a call yesterday. They're like, yeah, if you can get here at 9 in the morning and help out, you know, that would be great. And I'm actually a student at Drexel University in a community service organization called Drexel Circle K. And Circle K is an international community service organization throughout the world, and there's over 11,000 members in it.
And you're one of them who has decided to put some time and effort and some hard work and some muscle into this.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for doing that. We really appreciate it. And Joy and her granddaughter have been here since early on. You brought some things in, and then you decided to stay.
Well, yes, we've been feeling we had to do something. It's very frustrating to just sit at home and watch television.
Well, we thank you both very much. Thank you.
Every person here has a lot to give, and you can just look around. The spirit of everybody, the freedom, we will win. anymore.
Thank
It's
you.
our privilege to do this. It is definitely our privilege.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And now back to you in the studio.
A couple of generations of giving there. On this National Day of Remembrance, many somber prayers and patriotic hymns were heard across our region. This morning, Philadelphia's St. John Newman High School was the scene of a heartfelt gathering of students and staff, gathering in the school auditorium to...
Our distinguished of Columbia is Eleanor Holmes Norton.
Gentlewoman from District of Columbia is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank the gentleman for yielding. I have always opposed the wholesale use of our mighty military power, except with a scalpel. However, I have always assumed that my country would never be attacked where we live, and that my constituents and neighbors would never be innocent victims. The language before us...
The best of mankind. Live across the Hudson, overlooking Manhattan and Liberty State Park. I'm Dan Cuellar, Channel 6 Action News.
Thank you, Dan. We have new information just in, developing story on the investigation into the terrorist attacks. Federal investigators have developed information indicating that the city of Atlanta may have been targeted by terrorists. That, according to law enforcement officials speaking on condition of anonymity told the Associated Press that information obtained during FBI interviews of people who knew the hijackers indicated that Atlanta had been chosen for an attack. Authorities said they are still developing leads here, declined to be any more specific about what they know, whether the threat continues at this time. Back in our area now, 30th Street Station fell quiet at midday today for a moment of silence.
My boy. Good sign.
Andrew Racono and Greg Coy, thanks for that report. Okay. We should tell you, just as Greg kind of preluded to there, that Mayor Giuliani is hoping to open a lot of those shops below 14th Street now by this weekend, and they have been taking
and total today.
To the subway, running under it all, and as they run through, then they go back and take measurements of the vibrations and see what it's done to the buildings. And right now they feel like quite a few of them that we discussed yesterday, the Millennium Hotel for one and Liberty Plaza, are actually safe.
Yeah, and you know, I was listening to the radio reports last night as I was driving home, and listening to an interview from a store owner in the area there, and actually a pub owner, and he said that, you know, his place has been an institution for so many years, and it's safe, but he doesn't know if he's ready to open it up yet. Yeah. You know, I mean, there's no physical reason not to, it's just mentally.
Right.
He doesn't know if he's ready to open.
A lot of people probably feeling that.
Yeah.
We're going to take a break right here. On your screen, though, you'll see some of the names of those from our area who are listed as missing from Tuesday's terrorist attack.
I can't believe I waited so long to ask my daughter.
You have to have your hands in New York City. No more of that rain weighing down that soot, making a very heavy plaster.
Keep my mouth shut because 4 confirmed fatalities. Just the chance of finding survivors sends a steady stream of fresh volunteers forward and has unleashed a flood of affection from ordinary New Yorkers.
Still to come on the NewsHour tonight, an investigation update. Senators Graham and Hagel, and the last act of Shields and Gigot. Spencer Michaels has our investigation story.
The names of the alleged terrorists who took part in Tuesday's airplane attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon were announced today in Washington. At a news conference, the FBI said 19 people were involved. All were ticketed passengers, and many were believed to have had pilots training. On American Airlines Flight 11, which destroyed the World Trade Center's North Tower, there were 5 hijackers. On United Airlines Flight 175, which destroyed the World Trade Center's South Tower, 5 hijackers. 5 hijackers were also aboard American Airlines Flight 77, which crashed into the Pentagon, and on United Airlines Flight 93, which crashed into the Pennsylvania countryside, there were 4 hijackers. The FBI has requested that anyone with information about these individuals call their local FBI or a toll-free number, 1-866-483-5137. Attorney General John Ashcroft.
The Federal Bureau of Investigation has also forwarded a list of more than 100 names to numerous law enforcement organizations. These are the names of individuals the FBI would like to talk to, because we believe they may have information that could be helpful to the investigation.
The FBI was reluctant to give details of its investigation other than to indicate how large it was.
As of today, we have 4,000 FBI special agents who are working on the case in various offices around the country and on various aspects of the investigation, and we have 3,000 support employees also on the investigation. 20 FBI legal offices are running down leads overseas, and all 56 FBI offices around the country are engaged in the investigation. To date, we have had more than 36,000 total leads. Of those, over 30,000 have come in off the internet. 3,800 have been received on the FBI hotline, and another 2,400 have been generated through the various field offices.
Early today, searchers probing blackened rubble at the Pentagon found key electronic flight data and voice recorder black boxes from the hijacked jetliner that slammed into the building Tuesday.
FBI agents from the evidence response team recovered both black boxes from the aircraft that crashed into the Pentagon. The condition of the black boxes, the voice recorder was described as somewhat damaged on the exterior. The data recorder was described as being charred on the exterior. I'm told by those who know about these things that that really doesn't mean anything at this point, that those boxes must be downloaded and the data taken off to determine whether or not any real damage has occurred. And I do not know what the status of the boxes are right now, other than the fact that they are now part of the federal investigation into this horrible incident.
The boxes were taken to the National Transportation Safety Board, but the FBI said that so far it had learned nothing from the voice data recorder. Last night in New York, authorities detained at least 10 people of Middle Eastern descent in 2 separate groups at Kennedy and LaGuardia airports. The action shut down all 3 New York area airports and led to a night of media reports that another hijacked attempt had been thwarted. At a news conference in New York this morning, the FBI said investigators determined none of the detainees had any connection to the terrorist attacks.
The reporting that has been going on all night, I can definitively tell you, is inaccurate. We were out at both airports last evening. We did talk to approximately a dozen individuals. We have only one individual left who is still being questioned by the task force. All other 10 have been released and have been on their way.
The New York area's 3 major airports were opened by noon today after an 18-hour shutdown.
Now more on what Congress is doing, and to Elizabeth Farnsworth.
As we reported earlier, Congress approved a $40 billion package today for recovery efforts in New York, increased transportation security, and the counter-terrorist effort. Also, the Senate approved a use of force resolution. And members have been receiving briefings about the progress of the terrorist attack investigations. We talk about all that now with 2 senators, Democrat Bob Graham of Florida, he's chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, and Republican Chuck Hagel of Nebraska, a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Senator Graham, what can you add to the information we just heard about the investigation?
He was a football player first that
They began to kick me on the ground.
It happened before 9 o'clock.
Like a kangaroo.
Mike Gersavich, Tennessee Titans.
Today, and with the airline down, of course, a lot of that merchandise went into our ground system. Some of that was delayed, but last night we were up and
company just across the river from New York's financial district. Last night they arrived with search warrants and removed 13 computer hard drives from a company called Urban Moving Systems. The agents took numerous photographs and also searched the roof of the building, and they appeared to be examining for vantage points. The World Trade Center would once have been visible from the roof of the business. Immigration is still holding 5 men who were detained Tuesday on a New Jersey highway in a van that belongs to this company. And some of the men are employees. They were picked up after the FBI issued a national alert for a white Chevy van with New Jersey plates and urban moving systems on the side. Witnesses had called in reports of men in a van that fit that description because they were seen celebrating across the river from the financial district after the 2 hijacked planes slammed into the World Trade Center towers. Federal agents descended on the moving company that very day, but neighbors said they did not go inside. Last night, the FBI agents returned to the business at about 8:30 p.m., and this time they had search warrants. They were there for 3 hours, and that's when they took the computers and combed the roof. The owner of the company would not answer any of the questions that we asked him on the 2 occasions that we tried to speak with him, including last night. His attorney said today the owner is not a target of the investigation and that he's cooperating fully. The FBI will not comment except to say that they are following every lead and that this is one of many thousands. In fact, in a news conference today, the director of the FBI, Robert Mueller, said they have received more than 30,000 leads.
Of those, over 30,000 have come in off the internet. 3,800 have been received on the FBI hotline, and another 2,400 have been generated through the various field offices.
We've also learned of another potential connection close to the financial district, geographically speaking. Today, the FBI released a list of the 19 hijackers, and while most of them seem to have lived in Florida, 2 of them had addresses right here in Fort Lee, New Jersey, a town just on the other side of the George Washington Bridge, a main artery into Manhattan. And we know that on Wednesday, the FBI served a search warrant on this mailboxes, etc. in Fort Lee, New Jersey. Law enforcement was there for more than 12 hours collecting fingerprints and other evidence, trying to determine if one of the hijackers was using a P.O. box number at the location. And law enforcement in New Jersey towns that face Manhattan have been on high alert since the attack because, as many of us know, this area was a staging area for the bombing of the World Trade Center back in 1993.
And as you mentioned, it is right on the main artery into Manhattan. And you know, Michelle, I think you and I were talking in the newsroom and you brought this up, and that is that this investigation is so widespread. We're going to be seeing these stories develop as the weeks go on and they manage to piece together new information. So this is not the end of it.
Yes, I imagine there are hundreds of search warrants being served throughout the country, similar to these kind of situations.
All right, and I know you'll be following up a lot for us. Thank you, Michelle Carusa Cabrera. Ron, in case, you know, tell me what you've been seeing in terms of going into Manhattan before we go on to Jennifer Lewis Hall and some of our other correspondents, because you've been in both days. I have not had a chance to see firsthand what you've seen.
Well, as many people have suggested, you know, New York is not so much a city as a collection of neighborhoods or almost small enclaves, and depending on where you are on the island, the environment, the traffic patterns are completely different. Certainly below Canal Street, which is at the very southern end of Manhattan, it is dominated by backhoes and other sorts of construction equipment to help clear the debris. Midtown is filled with traffic, and then Uptown is relatively calm. So by degrees, as you move north, the city's lifestyle appears more normal.
It's, well, whatever normal has become.
Whatever normal has become, indeed.
All right, corporate earnings, of course, are also the focus, and there's a lot of fallout from Tuesday's terror attack on America. General Electric, the parent of this network, says its losses at its employer's reinsurance division, which is a large reinsurer of the World Trade Center, will cut third-quarter results by 4 cents to 33 cents a share. The company says before the tragedy, it was on track to make 37 cents a share. GE repeats its underlying financial strength remains unchanged. And ever since the world watched in horror
as terrorists attacked the United States, Sue, corporate America has joined the relief efforts with donations of money, goods, and other support from companies like our parent General Electric, Cisco Systems, Microsoft, to name a few. Other companies have been offering their help as well, and Jennifer Lewis Hall joins us now with more on that part of the story. Hi, Jennifer.
A bit of good news tonight, Ron. Businesses are really chipping in a very big way. Now, helping out families of victims, as you just said, their children, and in the rebuilding of New York City and Washington, D.C., as Ron and Sue just said. General Electric, the parent company of CNBC, one of the big names kicking off those relief efforts earlier.
May he comfort our own, and may he always guide our country. God bless America.
Connor O'Neill.
Ashley Banfield, who's been down working very hard in Lower Manhattan, trying to get the information out to us. Ashley, thank you very much. Now, from ground zero, where it all began, to the faces of the men and women and children looking for their missing loved ones, Monica Novotny has been at the Armory in New York City all day, and that's where families have been going to get information about their loved ones. Monica, what's the story there?
John, the real story here is that as family members come and they go into the Armory and they look at those patient lists, those lists just aren't long enough. It is very difficult for people to find the names that they're looking for. But they're here because they have to be. They all tell me the same story, that they simply can't sit at home. They can't be watching this on television or reading about it. They, at least if they come out here, they feel like they're doing something. They feel like they're active. John Winter is joining me now. John, you are missing your partner. You have not spoken to him since Tuesday morning. Tell me where Tony was.
Tony probably would have been on the 97th floor of One World Trade Center if he had got to work on time.
And you actually live with, your apartment has a view of World Trade Center.
Yes.
And you knew he was headed to work, and
Yes.
you actually saw what happened. Can you describe that?
Yes, it takes him about probably 10 minutes to get to work, and about 10 minutes after he left, I was by the window and I heard what I thought was thunder, and I looked up and then I saw the edge of One World Trade Center just sort of blow out, explode, and I just couldn't believe what I saw. I thought it was a bomb. I really did.
How did you even, I mean, did your knees buckle? I can't imagine watching something like that.
I just felt sick to the pit of my stomach, and I just didn't want to see it. I just didn't want it to happen. It was like, please, God, no, you know.
Did you have any contact with Tony? Had you heard from him before? Was there any contact after? We've heard those stories of people getting voice messages or cell phone calls, anything like that?
No, unfortunately, I didn't. And as soon as I sort of came to my senses, I grabbed the phone and I dialed his extension number in the office, but it just didn't ring. It was dead. It was dead. And I just hoped that he hadn't got there. And that's why I'm down here with his picture, because I'm hoping that he's in a hospital somewhere and he's unconscious maybe, because I know he didn't carry his ID with him. He kept it in his computer bag, so it would not have been in his pocket. And if he got separated from his computer bag, then he wouldn't have ID on him. So it would be difficult, if he couldn't talk, for somebody to know who he was.
You told me the floor that he was on, you're concerned because of where you're reading that the plane actually hit the building. You're concerned that it might be on that floor.
That's my biggest fear, because he was on 97, and from the reports that I've seen in the newspapers and from the footage I've seen on TV, and plus looking up at the building and knowing the building, because I worked there for a good while.
In fact, you were almost in that building yourself.
I was. My company only moved me from the 99th floor of that building last Wednesday, so I would have been there too.
How are you getting through this, John, these last few days?
Oh, do you know, it is so very, very hard. I have moments when I can cope, and I have moments where the pain is so great I just have to give in. But I'm not going to give in, and I'm not going to stop hoping, because I can't stop hoping for him. I felt I would give up on him if I did stop hoping.
What will you do next?
I'm going to go into the Armory now, and I'm going to register him, because I've been on Staten Island. I couldn't get back to my apartment, so I went out to Staten Island, where I had a friend, and I stayed with her until today when I came back in. And then tomorrow I'm going to go around the hospitals, and I'm going to put his poster up around the hospitals.
John, we wish you the very best. Our prayers are with you. Thanks for sharing your story.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
John, that is just one of hundreds of stories that we're hearing today. It is a difficult place to be, because this is the other half of this tragedy, the people who are left to pick up the pieces. But that is the latest from here. Back to you.
It's one of the most difficult parts of this story, and we appreciate you bringing it to us, Monica. Unfortunately, there are hundreds. People have been lining up by the hundreds in New York City to get some word on their loved ones. They have pictures with them, and these people have been missing since Tuesday's attack. And they're also turning now to the internet to help them search. Here's NBC's George Lewis.
They gather near the scene of the disaster in Lower Manhattan. People with pictures of missing loved ones, trying to get news, any news at all about those who vanished.
My son
When he see the building, he said to me, "Mom, that's the building that my dad was in." I said, "Yes." He said to me, "Mom, I think he's dead." I said, "No, he's not. He's coming back to us very soon."
And they also gather on the internet, posting missing persons notices on message boards, hoping someone, anyone, will respond.
We've been looking at all the lists on all the different websites. We've been calling, frantically, constantly to all the different numbers, just hoping and praying that we can find him.
At a website called the Disaster Message Service, these were among thousands of messages. Wednesday, looking for Karen Haggerty. A response Thursday, Karen Haggerty hospitalized in critical condition. 2 graduate students at the Berkeley campus of the University of California started another website where survivors of the disaster can let the world know they're okay.
It helps people to cope, but I think it helps me to cope to know that at least I'm doing my best to try and make something better in a very bad situation.
We'd really like to pass around the internet address to as many people as possible at safe.millennium.berkeley.edu and to try and get everybody to register.
So far, they say, they've got 80,000 names on their list. They received 1.5 million inquiries. One man turned to the instant messaging service at yahoo.com to reach his wife at the World Trade Center when the phone stopped working. He said tears ran down his face when he read the message from her, "Honey, I am safe and alive." Yahoo has also created a way for people to donate to relief organizations helping the victims of the terror attacks.
We've had the donation sites up for less than a day, and the American Red Cross alone is getting about over $200,000 an hour of donations on our website alone, and I'm sure this is happening around the web.
We think that the internet is really the best thing to happen to philanthropy. I've gotten so many emails from friends passed on urging me to either give blood or go to a vigil or a memorial service or to give money.
The internet was originally designed for military communications during the Cold War. Now it's being used by civilians to help the victims of what the president calls a new kind of war. For today, George Lewis, NBC News, Los Angeles.
We want to mention that President George W. Bush is apparently still in New York City at an undisclosed location. We believe he's scheduled to go back to the White House later on tonight. But earlier in the day, he did go to this prayer service. He spoke at the prayer service at the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C., an emotional day for the president, but also a moment to pray and to remember those who died in these terrorist attacks. We will rebroadcast at 3 a.m. Eastern Time, 12 midnight Pacific Time, the prayer service at the National Cathedral. In the meantime, the investigation continues into the hijackers, and the alleged hijackers are thought to have gotten their pilots training in Florida. For the latest on that, we go to NBC's Kerry Sanders.
The portrait emerging to FBI investigators, the suicide pilots lived out of suitcases, constantly on the move. 22-year-old Waleed al-Shari, one of the identified suicide pilots. For 5 weeks this year, he lived at this Boynton Beach, Florida motel. $285 a week, paying his way with a Visa card.
I'm just worried about how they get to be so close, and you never know. They be right here and you'll never know nothing.
Other pilots on the FBI list stayed at the Bimini Hotel in Hollywood for a month this year. $650. The hotel manager says an anonymous man paid the bill in advance in cash.
And he said that he was looking for a room for these guys for a month because they wanted to get their pilot's license.
NBC News has obtained copies of airline tickets purchased just 6 days before the hijackings, sold to suicide pilots Saeed Al-Ghamdi and Ahmed Al-Nami. The tickets purchased at this Fort Lauderdale travel agency. The only demand, according to the travel agent who sold the tickets, the men said they had to be in Newark, New Jersey by the 7th, just 3 days before the terrorist attacks. The men paid $139.75 each to fly Spirit Airlines from Fort Lauderdale to Newark.
We get a lot of people that come up and only buy one-way tickets. They were very quiet. They just sat there. They were patient while I looked up different flights. They paid in cash, and they didn't wait for their change, and then they left.
Several of the suicide pilots used as their home addresses, mailboxes, etc., making it difficult for anyone to track them down. And sources tell NBC News, to cause further confusion, several men on the FBI list of 19 would sometimes switch the order of their names. Suicide pilot Zaid Zerahi telling some people he met his name was actually Zerahi Zaid Shahir.
That was NBC's Kerry Sanders reporting, and as a result of what those suicide pilots did, Logan Airport in Boston remains closed tonight. Reagan International Airport in Washington remains closed tonight, although we are told that Logan Airport in Boston is opening at 5 o'clock in the morning. You're watching live NBC News coverage of the attack on America.
I love you. I love you, Quintran and Raymond. I love you very much. A plane hit the building. I don't know what's going on. I will talk to you. Love you. Bye.
I don't know where he is. And I know if he made it out of that building, he would have called me up immediately. Well, it's just hard to know that 15,000 families or more than that are just destroyed for no reason.
This conflict was begun on the timing and terms of others. It will end in a way and at an hour of our choosing.
Welcome back to NBC News, continuing coverage of the attack on America as America mourns. I'm John Siegenthaler. It's 7 p.m. Eastern Time, 4 p.m. Pacific Time, and here's the very latest. The Associated Press quotes law enforcement officials as saying Atlanta may have been a target of terrorists. The officials say the information
both economically and diplomatically. Economic sanctions, though, if you look at the history of them, really don't work all that well. Whatever despot is in charge, they usually find some way to get around it, or they simply starve out their own people. And in the case of bin Laden and the Taliban, it's quite evident that they don't hold human life very dear, so it's not clear that just economic sanctions would work.
Jim, as we've been speaking, we were watching a Red Cross ship, the USS Comfort, travel up the Hudson River in New York, escorted, of course, by security boats on the water. Let me ask you to elaborate a little bit more on the Taliban, who this morning sent world markets into a tailspin by suggesting that if the U.S. were in fact to attack, invade, or take any steps against Afghanistan militarily, it would retaliate. That caused a stir around the globe this morning. What kind of retaliation, aside from terrorism, could one expect from the Afghani leaders?
Well, the Afghani leaders really don't have much ability to retaliate beyond their borders. The most troublesome thing might be if they try to spread their kind of Islamic fanaticism and insurrection into neighboring Pakistan. Now, that's what worries the Pakistanis the most, and that's why, in fact, the Pakistanis for a number of years have not been very cooperative with the U.S. government. However, there are signs. Secretary of State Powell has requested of the Pakistani overflight rights, sharing of intelligence and the like from Pakistan in an effort to, should the U.S. launch a military strike against Afghanistan. So terrorism, I guess, would be the #1 weapon at the disposal of the Taliban, but the administration is intent on trying to stem that.
Thank you, Jim. We appreciate it. Jim Miklaszewski of NBC News. While the investigation continues, a lot of people are wondering how the attacks will alter the United States' national security policies and, of course, its relationship with other nations. The Wall Street Journal's national security correspondent Neil King joins us with more on that and, of course, an update on the status of the investigation. Nice to see you again, Neil.
Nice
Welcome back.
Thanks.
What is the latest that you know, anyway?
Well, I mean, on the investigation side, the evidence is really pouring in a pretty unprecedented way, in that they have, of course, the names of these people. They know where they lived. They know where they came from. They know where they were educated when it comes to the pilots. But in a lot of ways, as you know, this is not a judicial process. We're not looking for the kind of evidence necessarily that, well, we couldn't bring these people to trial anyway because they've died. But it's more, what do you do with the evidence and where do you take it? And of course, on that front, it's more, how do you retaliate, and then how do you try to root out the evil that still lurks out there, both at home and abroad. And that's...
Since Princess Diana died 4 years ago. Hundreds of British citizens reportedly were among those killed at the World Trade Center. And around the world, other countries also remembered the victims with a moment of silence. Moment of silence around the world for the victims of the terrorist attacks. I have one other bit of information from Associated Press. The FBI says that 3 of the 5 suspected of hijacking an American Airlines jet that crashed into the Pentagon lived in San Diego last year. We've heard of one group that lived in Florida, another that apparently now lived in San Diego. One of the men is believed to have piloted the plane that slammed into the Pentagon, killing 190 people. As people around the world and the country mourn, there's also a good amount of anger. Most of it is directed at those who orchestrated these attacks and their suspected leader, Osama bin Laden. Who is the man and how is he capable of such a crime? Well, New York Times reporter Judith Miller has been covering the Islamic world for almost 20 years, and she provided NBC News with some insight.
I don't think he's crazy. He is devious, he is clever, he is relentless, and he is patient.
But he is not a madman.
But he is not a madman.
Judith Miller is a reporter for the New York Times. She's covered the Arab world since 1983, when she was chief of the Times Cairo bureau. Is calling this even fanaticism too simplistic?
Fanatic is actually a very good word to describe them. They are highly motivated, they are highly disciplined, and we underestimate them at our peril.
Understanding them is critical, too. What would motivate a young man, average age of a suicide bomber is 22, to sacrifice his life as an unknown number did?
I think despair is partly responsible for this wave of suicide bombings.
Because they have nowhere else.
Because they have nowhere else to go. I mean, I have interviewed so many of these young people with so much hope for the future and so few prospects.
Especially the educated ones.
Especially the educated ones.
Dr. Gerald Post is a professor of political psychology at George Washington University. He's also a psychiatrist.
These people are distinctly not psychologically disturbed. In fact, interestingly, psychiatrically disturbed individuals are expelled from the groups because they're considered a security risk.
Many say it's a perversion of Islam, that the Quran condemns suicide. But radical Islamic sects do not call it suicide. In their interpretation, not to act is immoral.
The motivation for these acts is both religious and social. And the social motivation is a fusion of nationalism and radical Islam.
What did America do to unleash this hell upon us?
Well, according to Osama bin Laden, we defiled sacred Saudi and Islamic soil.
When?
In 1990 and 91, when we sent American and international troops to defend his country against Iraqi soldiers.
Just as the Soviets had defiled Islamic soil in Afghanistan in 1979. Financed in part by his money, the Mujahideen then drove the Soviets out.
He needed an enemy. But he needed an enemy, precisely. And he also had an enemy because the Palestinian people were being, quote, oppressed. and it was the duty of all Muslims to come and rescue them. And the Arab countries were being, quote, oppressed by autocratic, horrible rulers whose rule he also wanted to terminate. And he felt that by mobilizing and training Arabs all over the world and Muslims from all over the world, he could accomplish this.
Bin Laden and other radical factions of Islam frighten many in the Arab world too. They may not represent mainstream Muslims, but they are determined and well-financed. But Judith Miller argues that to persist in seeing them as crazy fanatics is dangerous.
We have to get rid of this image of these people as kind of wild-eyed fanatics who are disorganized and can't get their act together.
Why do we have to?
I think if we don't discard these images and stereotypes, we will underestimate the enemy.
What is it about the American psyche that may be undermining our own interests?
I think sometimes any democracy is ill-equipped because we are open. That is our trademark. We are ill-equipped to fight people who are looking constantly for our weaknesses, for our vulnerabilities, for ways in which we can be hurt.
Judith Miller covers bin Laden, weapons of mass destruction, and many other subjects for the New York Times. We just saw her in Jane's piece. Judy, good morning. Thanks for coming in.
Good morning, Katie.
Well, you know, there's so much to talk about with you, but first, Osama bin Laden and his followers. Obviously, highly trained, highly educated, very smart. You say they're not crazy. How can you say that?
Well, I think people who are militant are not necessarily crazy. People who are extreme should not be considered off the charts because they are highly determined people.
And it's too easy to dismiss people that we say are crazy. You say, as you told Jane, fanatic is a much more appropriate word for them.
Absolutely, and I never liked the term fundamentalists. Sometimes we used to hear that they were called Muslim fundamentalists. Well, that means somebody who wants to go back to the basics
Who's a
of
purist.
his religion. Exactly, and you know, that's not what these people are. They have a very perverse, embittered interpretation of their religion, one that is not shared by most Muslims.
And anyone who does not share their view is basically
is an infidel, is a traitor to Islam, and they define who, if I can use this term, is kosher and who is not.
And so this all basically dates back to the Gulf War, or was this sentiment pretty strong even prior to that?
It's been strong much for a long, long time in the region, and long before the Gulf War.
But did the U.S. become the clear-cut enemy during the Gulf War? Because,
Yes, it
in
did.
fact, we came to Saudi Arabia
because we came to Saudi Arabia to defend them, but the fundamentalists, as they call themselves, and I call them fanatics, did not see it that way. They believed that the United States was there to prop up their, quote, corrupt regimes. They believed that the Egyptian government, the Saudi government, the governments that rule them, even though they claim to be Muslim governments, are actually infidel governments. They're not really Muslims, and so they want them overthrown, and they want the United States to leave the region.
How many followers does this individual, Osama bin Laden, have? Or is there any way of determining that?
It's very hard to determine, but we do know that some 5,000 people from all over the world passed through the training camps that he runs, that he personally finances and controls. But I think, Katie, it would be wrong to concentrate just on this one man. I think you have to look at the group of men, and by the way, it's always men, around him. These Egyptian militants, most of them, and Algerian militants, a few of them, are equally determined to wreak havoc and bloodshed on the United States.
So certainly our troubles are not over if Osama bin Laden is dispensed of.
Absolutely correct, and that's why I think it was very interesting that the administration said that it would be necessary not only to get the people who did this, but get the people who support them. And in that sense, he's referring not only to Osama bin Laden, but to the people who run the network, to the, quote, sleeper agents whom he has sent out all over the world.
To have infiltrated legitimate organizations, correct?
Absolutely, we believe so, and that's what the FBI is looking for now in this country and what our allies will soon be looking for. and the countries that host such people.
Do they move around, though, like chess pieces? And I know Andrea Mitchell a few days ago described him as the master of disguise, someone who moves from place to place. We understand that Bob Woodward said, I guess in the Washington Post, no one knows where he is right now, I believe. That's a difficult thing.
It's a very difficult thing because I've traveled to Afghanistan, and it is one very large, sparsely populated country, and there are many, many places to hide.
Tell me about the relationship between Osama bin Laden and the Taliban. First of all, we keep saying the Taliban, and there's so many people watching this who still don't understand, what is the Taliban?
Well, I think they're kind of hard to explain unless you've seen them in action. They are a group of self-described students of Islam. These are people who emerged from the religious schools after the Soviet Union was expelled from their country, mostly by their fathers. And these were people who were determined to bring their sort of Islamic rule, a very fanatical Islamic rule, to their country.
Are they in charge of Afghanistan?
They are in charge of 90% of it. There's a small sliver in the northern part of the country which they do not control.
And of course, I was going to say their zealous nature has surfaced in terms of their treatment of women in Afghanistan, which has gotten a lot of attention in this country. Women are not allowed to leave their homes. The punishment that is given out for various infractions is just unbelievable.
Well, I think, Katie, this comes in waves. When I was there last fall, women, you were in the market, you did see them, but they're totally covered. You never see their faces. They wear something called a burqa. They cannot work. If you're a little girl, you cannot be educated, and this, by the way, is totally contrary to Islamic tenets. It's just not part of Islam, but that's their interpretation of it.
So, Judy, what is the relationship between the Taliban and Osama bin Laden and his followers?
I think that the Taliban owe Osama bin Laden big time because he has helped finance their regime.
Where does he get all this money, by the way?
Oh, he's from one of the wealthiest families in Saudi Arabia. When his father died in 1968, he inherited $300 million just of his own. He's one of some 20 sons of one of the wealthiest, best connected families in the kingdom. So this man has money.
So he's been giving it to the Taliban, helping to finance their efforts.
Absolutely. And they owe him. Plus, there's an ideological affinity. They have the same views. And for the Afghans who really do believe in this concept of, quote, hospitality, and a guest is sacred and you must lay down your life to protect your guest, it's going to be very hard for Mullah Omar, who is the blind young sheikh, one-eyed sheikh who leads them, to turn over his guest. Plus, as I said, they're turning over their meal ticket.
I hate to leave things on a very frightening note, but I know you've just written a book called Germs about bioterrorism.
Yes.
Tell me about the Taliban and Osama bin Laden and his followers in terms of their nuclear capability or their capabilities to produce and deliver chemical and biological weapons.
Well, I think this is what scares me the most, and it's the reason that I was so determined to write this book and write about them. Osama bin Laden and Muslim fanatics like him are absolutely determined to get their hands on chemical and biological and nuclear weapons. Biological weapons in particular are terrifying, and when I was in Afghanistan, I tried to visit a camp where he and his followers have been experimenting with chemical and biological agents, and the United States knows that because it has seen pictures of dead animals lying around these camps, which have presumably been poisoned or filled with chemicals, to see what will happen to them. And I think one reason the Bush administration is determined now to do something about this problem is that this time they attacked America with a conventional weapon, that is one of our own planes loaded with jet fuel, 4 of them in this horrible simultaneous attack. But next time we could be attacked with weapons of mass destruction, with biological weapons, which could make thousands and thousands of Americans sick. And that's why I think the Bush administration and the Clinton administration before Bush was determined to try and begin to prevent such groups from getting their hands on such horrible weapons.
And their nuclear capabilities?
Not yet. They don't have nuclear weapons. Afghanistan does not. Pakistan, which is its rather fanatical neighboring state and is now being asked to help the United States, they do have nuclear weapons. This technology is spreading, and it poses a danger to all democracies, and I think to all civilized people.
And do you think Pakistan will share its information on nuclear weapons with Afghanistan, or do you think in this instance will be supportive of the United States and stand behind U.S. military action?
I think Pakistan has a very difficult decision to make, and I know that administration or officials are hoping that they make the right decision, because if they do not, it will be very costly for the Pakistani people.
It's hard to really even digest all this. Judith Miller from the New York Times, a real expert on this part of the world and on Osama bin Laden. Thank you for your insight. We really appreciate it.
Hello, everyone. I'm John Siegenthaler at MSNBC World Headquarters, and we want to advise our affiliates with the NBC television network that there has been a power outage at Rockefeller Center in Manhattan, and we will continue our coverage there. You can see that parts of Manhattan are in the dark, but we will continue our coverage
forever.
Bob, I should have said that you also follow behavior,
That's right.
and I kind of misappropriated or misapplied that, but
beginning to go away.
Well, the crowd right now is pretty big because of the candlelight vigil, but as far as families actually coming and registering information with the authorities and taking a look at these lists, that has gone way down. Yesterday, the lines were around the corner. It could take an hour or even more than that to get through the line. Today, there were far fewer people. I think yesterday was really the day where people wanted to come in and give information. They were also asked to bring information back in later. They were asked to bring in hair samples. They were asked for immediate family to give blood samples so that DNA could be matched if a body was found.
Elizabeth Cohen at the Armory in New York. Once again, thank you so much for sharing those stories with us. Back to you, Joey.
Well, if New York also got much inspiration and hope from President Bush and his visit, you see that the work is still underway at the World Trade Center site. 24 hours a day, the perhaps thousands of people involved still working away down there. That is a live picture you're seeing from the scene. Also looking on to the scene today is CNN's Richard Roth, who's following up on the president's visit there. And Richard, if you could talk to us a little bit now about the impact that the weather might have had on the search efforts. I did see that the plumes of smoke seemed to be down somewhat. I'm wondering if the rain did at least have some effect on dampening down those big plumes of smoke coming up from the rubble.
Well, you're seeing work continuing right now in the rubble, just about an hour and a half after President Bush departed here. Tractors, excavation equipment, illuminated by floodlights, very eerie scene. But yes, above that rubble, hanging all over the workers, despite about 14 to 17 hours of driving, pounding rain and strong winds, the cloud is still there. It almost seems bigger. It is just a mix of dust and ash, and of course fears of some levels of asbestos concern a lot of people in this area, and the clouds are wafting a bit west at the moment over some of these buildings that are of concern to rescue workers. And still rushing to the scene here, a little late though, but like the cavalry, there's a gigantic line that stretches perhaps a mile. It goes past some of the skyscrapers here. I can't even see it. The buildings are a mixture of ambulances, buses, trucks, cars, because that West Side Highway, the main access road to get supplies and help into the World Trade Center zone, that was closed because of President Bush's visit. So now that he's gone, they've opened the road. It's an amazing sight of vehicles and nobody blowing a horn, which you could never get in Manhattan. Everybody just sitting quietly waiting for a police officer to wave them by, and a lot of people gathered around some of the supply trucks. Joey?
CNN's Richard Roth in Lower Manhattan at this hour.
Don't want. And so these are the lucky folks that are able to have this backup plan and have somewhere to go. You know, I've talked to other folks who had smaller investment firms where they are totally destroyed, and now they have to try to rebuild them.
You know, Sharon, the role of the internet and the ability to kind of telecommute, I think is a fascinating one in this story. I mean, if there is a small silver lining, it's that people have been able to communicate in some way, shape, or form through the internet, through their computer. They can work at home, and I think that tends to bring a sense of normalcy to some of this anyway.
Many people are doing that, and they had been doing that already, and fortunately for some folks I talked to today, that's where they were when this happened.
Wow.
So that was a benefit for them of not being in the office.
Thanks, Sharon.
All right.
Sharon Epperson.
All right, a little more breaking news on the market-oriented front. American International Group, one of the insurers that said it would sustain as much as a $500 million loss claim as a consequence of the World Trade Center bombings, has said it will buy back up to 40 million shares. That is in addition to a previously announced buyback plan of 10 million shares. So AIG joins Cisco and other companies who say they will be buying in their stock, Sue, in order to show some support for the market.
Right. We're going to go out and talk more about the airline industry right now. The airline industry has come under intense pressure, as we told you, following Tuesday's attacks, and airports across the country are attempting to reopen with a more strict set of guidelines, of course. But they are finding out that getting back to normal is going to be extremely difficult. Our Jane Wells is at the airport in Los Angeles with that part of the story, and that's normally an extremely busy airport. Jane?
Yeah, normally, Sue, 2,200 flights a day. Maybe a tenth of that today, but certainly more than yesterday. While we talked earlier about the domestic airlines have been taking off today, the international carriers, even the Air Canada flights behind me, still grounded while those carriers work out a new security protocol with the FAA. Incident here today over at the United Terminal, a man and woman taken in for questioning called suspicious. They were let go. But listen to this, up in San Francisco, we have some video. Coast Guard boats responded to a report of a man who had strapped himself to a Zodiac and a buoy in San Francisco Bay outside the airport, saying he was going to take out flights. It disrupted flights there for a short time. According to the local NBC station, the man was just trying to show how vulnerable the airport there is to attack from water. Well, law enforcement reacted there swiftly as passengers everywhere get used to the new way of doing business at America's airports. Life got slightly back to normal today, though normal may never be the same.
Take out to more left, that was 15. Oh, man, you have a nice day, sir.
And the skies were once again filled with the sounds of airplanes. Out of LAX today, carriers like Southwest and United began flying again. While inside Terminal 1,
We have to have you guys back away so we can get the crew members through.
the crowds were large but orderly. Only ticketed passengers were allowed past security. No private cars were allowed at the airport. No curbside check-in. This is just how it is now.
I think that's a good thing, but it's good to do that, to check everything, but you never know.
I expected pretty much what I'm seeing now. Lots of people, but not many vehicles.
It was much the same way at other airports, like the United Terminal in San Francisco. One of Tuesday's hijacked planes had been heading here.
And how are you feeling about flying this morning? Not good. But I have my mom, so it's okay.
The airlines are bracing for even more financial losses. The International Air Transport Association estimates the already suffering industry may end up with $10 billion in losses, not just from this week's unprecedented shutdown, but from people who may skip flying altogether rather than put up with this.
I need you to have your ticket and an ID prepared.
Though they did put up with it today without complaint.
There's a great sense of camaraderie. You just kind of see that everywhere.
It's like a love-in right here, really. Actually, you can see the solidarity of America coming through here. We're not going to let somebody dictate to us where freedom really rings, which is right here.
Sue and Ron, as you said, Gordon Bethune is suspecting that the losses are going to be much higher. Congress saying it's going to help, but there are already other changes. American Airlines, for example, planning to cut 500 flights. That's 20% of its schedule, though it's unclear if that was a decision that was already pre-planned due to tough economic conditions and whether the timing had anything to do with what happened this week. Back to you.
Hey, Jane, before we let you go, I know you've been at the airport for most of the day, but has Los Angeles gotten its feet under it yet? I mean, I know that most people there were extremely shaken up, as was the rest of the country. What's the mood now?
Well, as you know, 3 of the flights that were hijacked were headed here, so certainly there's a very personal loss for many people. But I have to tell you, you see it on the freeways. There are flags on just about every overpass on the 101 freeway. People have flags attached to their cars now, and people are driving politely. I haven't been cut off all week. I think everyone's just in a daze like everyone else.
Yeah. Well, they've got a lot of company in that. Thanks, Jane. We appreciate it. Jane Wells in L.A.
Now, we've addressed how institutions and professionals will deal with the restart of trading on Monday, but how will the individual investor approach what is a new world in many, many ways? Jerry Cobb has been looking into that question and joins us now live from Los Angeles. Jerry?
Well, Ron, brokerages and fund managers are bracing for a very busy day Monday. It will be the first time most individual investors will have to react financially to Tuesday's tragedy, and even old-timers in this industry aren't exactly sure what they'll do. If history is any guide, investors can be expected to flood Wall Street with sell orders Monday morning. But many market watchers believe cooler heads will ultimately prevail and prevent stocks from plummeting.
I think it's been good that we've all had a week to try to put this thing in this horrible development into perspective. And I think investors will come in Monday looking past the short term to the fact that our economy and our country will continue to be great.
But with so many workers missing or displaced from New York's financial district and so much damaged infrastructure, brokerages around the country could face delays and other problems executing trades for their clients. That's why many firms are beefing up staff and other resources to cope with what everyone expects will be a hectic first day back to business.
We've actually set up a separate queue for our clients that are from the impacted areas to try to deal with them specially, and it's been pretty amazing to us how resilient our investors have been through this process and really just operating business as usual.
One mutual fund manager tells CNBC clients that initially called him with sell orders when the terrorists struck have since rescinded those orders. Others believe investors will be encouraged by companies that plan to buy back their own stock. Cisco, for one, intends to repurchase as much as $3 billion of its shares.
There's been very broad encouragement coming out of the exchanges and the government for corporations who are inclined to do a buyback to be active and prepared on Monday, and certainly it could underpin a truly disorderly market.
Now, whatever you do, says David Testa of T. Rowe Price, don't put in an unlimited market sell order on the open on Monday. You're almost guaranteed to get the absolute lowest prices of the day, especially if you're selling shares of your mutual fund. Unless you absolutely need the cash, he says, most money managers believe you're probably better off waiting on the sidelines, where you will probably have plenty of company. Sue, Ron, back to you.
Thanks, Chair.
Well, while there truly is no accurate precedent to what has happened to America in the last several days, there are certain patterns of how Wall Street and investors have responded to crises past. Joining us now with some analysis and some perspective is a student of stock market history, Jim Bianco, the president of Bianco Research, who joined us tonight.
Anything yet? There's no backhoes. Nothing. They're not taking anything right now. Nothing. Nope. Right now we have one dump truck working with 2 guys in it, and that's it.
Does it make you frustrated?
Yeah, it does, because we're standing here doing nothing. We feel like we can help.
Yeah.
It's 3 days ago you felt like you were frustrated, you know, when all this happened.
It's good that they got enough people here that they have all this extra equipment here. It'd be a shame if nobody was here helping, so.
You gonna stick around, though?
Oh, yeah, we're staying.
Tonight, these men will sleep in their trucks, anxious for tomorrow, when they hope their hands can do what their hearts say they must. Thalia Ashuris, CBS News, New York.
There's an old saying, and it's true, that you have to be tough to make it in New York. But beneath that are a lot of soft hearts, and they've been touched by the events of this week. CBS's Richard Schlesinger looks at the change in New York attitude.
Well, let's go, up the block. This is what life is like in many parts of New York this week. At Grand Central Station, a bomb scare. Somebody said they saw something suspicious.
A lot of people start to see things.
It was enough to order the immediate evacuation of Grand Central, and it was all for nothing. No device was found. This incident was all scare and no bomb. These days, police have no choice but to consider every threat as the real thing, even though many of them are hoaxes.
We are having numerous bomb scares here in the city.
In just one day this week, there were 90 bomb threats in New York, and famous landmarks were frequently targets.
There was a phone call into the Empire State Building of a bomb threat.
Even though nothing was found after the evacuation, the Empire State Building is still a tense place today. Everybody is checked going in, and it's getting uncomfortable for some people to go to work in a high-profile building, the tallest one left in New York.
When you walk in the building and you walk down the hall and into your office, you're looking around.
Were you looking around?
I was looking around. I was looking around to see if there's anything on the ground or any unusual people walking around.
Larry Chaffetz works at a law firm on the 64th floor. He saw the attack on the World Trade Center from his window, and now he's always on guard.
At any moment, if there's any inkling that there's a problem, I'm leaving the building.
You know that. You've made that decision.
I've made that decision.
And that's what you're going to do.
Absolutely.
All through the day and all around the town, New York echoes with the sound of sirens. They are almost constant reminders that all is not well. And New York is not alone. In Kansas City, a bomb threat emptied City Hall.
How dare somebody do that? I mean, this is crazy.
And in Jacksonville, Florida, a bus station was evacuated when somebody noticed a package that seemed suspicious. It turned out to contain clothes.
How realistic are all the fears? Who knows?
For 29 years, Norbert Garrett worked for the CIA in the Middle East. He's familiar with the pattern of terrorism.
We have seen perhaps the first phase of a carefully organized.
With the belief.
I think it's a very, very deep emotional thing for everybody all across the country. I don't think it's, it hit New York, but it's hitting the whole country.
Which is why part of downtown Seattle shut down today. Why 15,000 firefighters, police, and citizens gathered just to be together, to pray, to mourn, to remember.
It means we're all thinking of them. We're all there.
And I think I can speak for every firefighter in the nation that if they are tired and they're weary and they need some help, all they have to do is put out the call and we'll be there for them just like they would be here for us.
Parents brought their children and thought about what they will learn from this someday.
I'll let him know how glad we were that we were together as a family, and we'll certainly express to him how lucky we are to be alive in this free country.
No one is going to cause me to fear my neighbor because of who they are or who they worship. I embrace my neighbors.
This couple, originally from India, says people now look at them differently, but they came here to pray with the rest anyway.
We really hurt, I cried. I still sick for many days because I was so depressed for that, because we are all, brother and sisters. Then it's very painful for us.
This man is the leader of a mosque that has received anti-Arab threats all week and was attacked by a man threatening arson last night.
I am a Muslim. I am American. I love America. God bless America.
Amidst the prayers, there was also talk of war, a subject not easily raised in this port city, which is surrounded by Army, Air Force, and Navy bases.
We'll probably be at war.
You feel we should be?
Yes, I do.
The hour-and-a-half-long ceremony concluded with a moment of silence. A continent away from New York and Washington, the message from residents here is, we all now stand as one. Neil Karlinski, ABC News, Seattle.
As you probably know, in your own neighborhood, newspapers have rushed to produce supplements on this, which have been valuable to us all, and some magazines. Time magazine is one, produced a remarkable collection of photographs, which it got to its subscribers, and I assume also to newsstands. ABC's John Quinones has spent some time with one photographer who lived near Ground Zero and had a remarkable day.
What I had seen in so many places in the world for the last 20 years, suddenly it was in my backyard.
Photographer James Knockway has shot every hotspot there is, from Bosnia to the Middle East. Get out of here! But when terrorists destroyed the World Trade Center, they struck his own neighborhood. His images appear in this week's Time magazine.
From my window, I can see the World Trade Center. I heard the sound and gathered my equipment and went over there. I began to photograph people being evacuated from the towers. Some were wounded, some were in a state of panic. It looked like the set of a science fiction movie. It looked like the apocalypse. It reminded me somewhat of the attack on Sarajevo or on Beirut.
How does this compare?
I saw it immediately as an act of war, as an act of aggression against a civilian population, a civilian target. Having spent weeks and sometimes months at a time in violent, chaotic places that were at war, whenever I came home, it was a kind of refuge.
You felt safe and secure.
Absolutely. And that's been severely undermined.
The photographers, many of them, that's one of them, but many of them have done some remarkable work and will remind us for years to come of this extraordinary day in the life of America. And we can't get it all in the last couple of minutes, but here is our contribution on this special edition of World News Tonight.
Yeah, water for now. Water and Gatorade.
When the rain's not helping at all. But, you know, we're here to do what we can do. And, you know, God bless America. That's what I'm saying.
But I do not know nothing.
It's just not knowing what's going to happen. And I just want him to walk through that door and make everything go away.
There are moments in history in which one has to take side, and fully and without any kind of ambiguity, I think we have to stand with the American institutions and American people and American government.
I'm very sorry about what happened, and me as a Palestinian kid, I'm totally against this terrorism in New York and in Washington.
And on behalf of Cincinnatians everywhere, I have proclaimed Cincinnati Day of Prayer.
Yes, our nation has been attacked, buildings destroyed, lives lost. But now we have a choice, whether to implode and disintegrate emotionally and spiritually as a people and a nation, or whether we choose to become stronger.
I can hear you, the rest of the world hears you, and the people who knock these buildings down will hear all of us soon. The nation sends its love,
Harry, by pushing
and compassion
No, sorry.
to everybody who is here.
Cross the line on that one.
Thank you for your hard work. Thank you for making the nation proud.
Thank you for making the nation proud. If you have only joined us today for this special edition of World News Tonight, I thank you, and I'm Peter Jennings, but our coverage continues, of course.
This is ABC News continuing coverage. Reporting from ABC News World Headquarters in New York, Peter Jennings.
Hello again, everybody. I'm Peter Jennings at ABC News headquarters in New York. Our coverage, of course, continues and will continue for the foreseeable future. I would like to tell you at the beginning that there is widespread concern in the country for the children, and tomorrow at 10 o'clock Eastern Time we are going to do a special edition of trying to answer children's questions. We've done it before on major issues. There have been few as major as this in the short run. It may remind some of you of the special we did at the time of the Gulf War. I hope you and perhaps your children will join us for that. But as our coverage continues tonight, it is now 8 o'clock in the east, 5 o'clock in the west. We're going to begin with a summary of the news of the day. This was a day on which the President of the United States was very visible in his role as Commander-in-Chief, in his role of consoler for the nation. And so we're going to go to the White House and our senior White House correspondent, Terry Moran. Terry, take it from there.
Well, Peter, you're right. This was a day where President Bush was required by the circumstances, and I think most people would say did, fill out those vast responsibilities that the presidency, the office of the presidency, has at a time like this. First at the prayer service at the National Cathedral, where he was joined by former presidents Clinton, Bush his father, Carter, and Ford. A show of solidarity across party lines and across the decades in this moment. And that was a very moving prayer service. I know we will have more on that. And then President Bush also trying to show the nation that the president would go to the moment of crisis, to the place of crisis, traveling to New York, of course, under heavy guard by combat jet fighters in the air. And when he got there, touring the devastation, accompanied by Governor Pataki and Mayor Giuliani, and at an intersection where 2 fire trucks were flattened by the falling debris from the collapsing towers, killing members of their crews, the president had some words to rally the rescue workers who were there.
The nation sends its love and compassion. God bless America! To everybody who is here. Thank you for your hard work. Thank you for making the nation proud. And may God bless America.
You know, Peter, it's sometimes said that the office of the presidency can make its occupant. It's been said about previous presidents that times of crisis, the nation seems to find a man who lives up to the moment, and that obviously is the test for President Bush. It is what people are looking to him so intently to do, and something that he has very much on his mind.
Thank you very much, Terry Moran. We'll go into this in greater detail as the evening goes on. ABC News has polled again on the subject of public perception of a great many things, but it is interesting to see that the president's approval rating is about 85% in general terms at the moment, but for handling this particular crisis, it's at about 91%. And it was indeed a brief moment of exhilaration, particularly for the firefighters, but for all of the relief workers down there at the Twin Trade Towers. But if you look very closely at that crowd today, even when the president there, you saw a deep somberness among many of the firefighters particularly who were there, but among all the relief workers, because here in New York today, it had the number of people missing and feared to be dead is almost 5,000 at the moment. And so there is a very, very widespread pall over the city of New York tonight, and ABC's Don Dahler is downtown there tonight. Don?
I need program in IFB.
Don, can you hear me? Don Dahler is down there tonight, and the effort continues. It is a slogging effort. It goes on in a very deliberate way. Many of the volunteers who are not professionals have left the scene, and in terms of the fire department and construction workers and steel workers, this is now a place where the professionals are doing the very often grisly, minute work of clearly still trying to find survivors, but clearly now trying to just bring out the dead. ABC's Cynthia McFadden is downtown in New York. She's at Union Square. Cynthia?
Actually, Peter, I'm a little further north.
Okay.
I was going to be at Union Square. I'm here still at the Armory on 23rd Street, where family members have gathered. And Peter, the scene here outside the Armory, where family members come to find out about loved ones, is really quite extraordinary right now. I think you can see the candlelight vigil going on. There are thousands of people gathered in these few blocks. We're just crammed in so tightly together, it's hard to even get a perspective on it. But I can tell you that behind our camera position are thousands of people holding candles and flags. I can tell you that they've been playing patriotic music for the last hour. And when the music stops, someone in the crowd inevitably calls out to play it again. It is really a moving place to be. People standing quietly, not pushing, not shoving, not talking very much, just sharing in these moments. Peter, every street corner, as we talked earlier, there are American flags. I mean, we have every person who goes by, police officer, handing out flags. We have a whole collection here of flags that have been handed to us over the last couple of hours. It is a very moving place to be, especially since at this moment this crowd has gathered in part not only to support the families, but because they believe the president is due to arrive any moment. And we believe from talking to police officers on the scene that within the next hour or so, maybe even less, he will be here to comfort the families and perhaps even to talk to some of the people of New York who've gathered.
Cynthia, there was a blackout very briefly in New York, at least in parts of New York. Did it affect your area?
No, it didn't. It didn't, Peter. We have lights. In fact, the rest of New York looks pretty normal in this area. I mean, the stores are open. The pizza shop across the way is serving pizza. It's just that everybody's a lot nicer than usual. People say please and thank you. People offer you drinks and food and hugs, and it's really quite an amazing time to be out on the streets of New York City.
Okay, Cynthia.
The families Peter, we have talked to, innumerable families today, and I think a little later in the broadcast you're going to get a chance to see some of them, a family who drove all the way from Indiana to find their Katie, families from all over the country who have driven in to try to find loved ones. It's really quite amazing.
Okay, Cynthia, thanks very much. New Yorkers like to say you should never judge them on the fact that they don't always say please and thank you, but it is certainly true at moments of crisis. New Yorkers respond in a unique way, and it has been interesting to find people in other parts of the country seeing New York at a moment of crisis, and this is still very much a moment of crisis. As I said, the authorities now believe that there are almost 5,000 people somewhere under that rubble. They're described as missing at the moment. They are not described as missing and presumed dead, but if you walk around what is called the hole at the very center of where the trade towers collapsed in and on themselves, as I did with the police commissioner earlier this morning, both before dawn and after dawn, there is a deeply dispirited feeling in that immediate location. It was made more complicated by the rain today, but as I said, the volunteer spirit which is evident in New York is still very much evident, but volunteers generally have been backed away from this area. Oh, there have been a few phonies who tried to get in. The police commissioner and his colleagues are disturbed at people who've showed up and tried to take advantage of the situation in order to get a closer look at this. I can also tell you that as we've seen it on television, is a pretty accurate, though maybe less intimate representation than you get in person. But what we see on television is pretty much the way it looks. There are these huge, huge pieces of material that need to be moved. And all day long, this is, if I may quote the police commissioner, not for the first time today, he used to work as a security expert in the Middle East as part of his career, paid a visit to Egypt and to the pyramids, was in awe, as many people are, of how they ever built the pyramids. And he said that he came back and he looked this morning and yesterday at this army of volunteers all over the rubble. This army of volunteers all over the rubble, he began to understand how they built the pyramids. Take a look at the center of your picture there. This is what happens piece by piece. There's a bucket brigade in one place. There's a huge piece that has to be moved in others, sometimes by hand. but the very heaviest machinery has moved in. The constant presence of noise makes it apparent that the intimacy and the quiet you sometimes need in order to listen, to hear survivors, to hear tapping, to hear a cry, to try to identify a cell phone that may be pinging somewhere is extremely difficult to achieve. One of the things that the nation's cell phone servers have been able to do in the last while from all parts of the country is to what they call pulse the cell phones of all of those subscribers whose families have told the cell phone companies had cell phones with them when they were at work. The search continues, but the level of hope has clearly gone down. We've managed to make contact with ABC's Don Data. Don?
Peter, yes, the volunteer spirit that you mentioned is still very much in effect here. This is a determined lot, but there's a definite darker cloud of despair that's entered into their voices when you talk to them. They're very, very eager to get back in there and continue their tedious work. Prior to the rains, the scene was one of, as you described it, the bucket brigades, the long lines of individuals working very, very hard. You would have at the top of the line,
it was a painful day and painful time.
It occurs, whether it's in the short term or long term, it's most effective if it...
It was like a Vietnam movie, and it was like you saw the war going on and all this stuff, and I had a bad day at work, and I came home, and Freddie was always the kind of person that just made you, it's like, oh, more fun, and just make you feel better. And, we said, like, you stress about these little things that happen in your everyday life, and then you watch something like this, and you realize that we have it so great, and it's like this, you never know. You just never know, and we were just so fortunate.
Chris, these are the stories that we're hearing. That's one example, but we just seem to be hearing them over and over again. And everybody is saying the same thing. The families who are coming out are saying they've come out because they have to, because they can't sit home, because they can't watch this on television, because they have to feel like they're doing something actively to help find that missing person in their lives. And it's so difficult to talk to them, and you feel for them. I also want to point out on another note that in addition to the family members that are here and the volunteers, also we're seeing people from the government. We spoke with the First Lady of New York, Libby Pataki, earlier today. We also spoke with the New York State Health Commissioner, Antonia Novello. And one of the things I asked her about on a different note was the asbestos, because a lot of New Yorkers have been concerned. We have heard confirmation that there is asbestos at the core of Ground Zero. We've seen the smoke as it's been coming in plumes, and it's been blowing all the way up uptown in New York City. A lot of people are concerned about that. I asked Ms. Novello about that. She says it is not a concern. She says absolutely they have measured, and there is nothing for New Yorkers to worry about at this point. She says they've also tested the water. So another note for New Yorkers out there who are concerned about that. They're keeping an eye on it.
Okay, thank you very much, Monica Novotny. Let's go right now for the latest on the investigation with Dan Abrams. Dan, what is the latest word on finding these people involved in this horror?
Well, Chris, the latest on finding them is that the FBI is conducting a nationwide, and with the assistance of other countries, an international search. A number of people have been detained in European countries, from England to France, Germany, Belgium, the Netherlands, the Philippines. People detained in all of those countries, but unclear as to what connection, if any of them may have had to the bombings. But there's another angle to this, and that is not just to find who did this, but to prevent it from happening again. Now, you have the names of 19 hijackers that have now been released. 5 of them on 3 of the planes, 4 on another plane. We've also learned some information about them. A lot of them seem to have spent some time in Florida. At least 5 of them lived in Florida at one point. At least 3 of them trained at a flight school in Florida. So no question that the focus of this investigation, I shouldn't say the focus, but at least part of this investigation is going to be focused on the state of Florida, trying to find friends, associates, neighbors, credit card receipts, phone records, anything that will give them a sense of who else might have been involved. These guys are dead. Now the question is, who else helped them? That's what they're looking for. There's another interesting angle. There's the Associated Press reporting now that Atlanta may have been a target of the terrorists. That's all we know. We don't know anything more about how they would have gone about achieving that. But the Associated Press saying that through interviewing various people who knew the hijackers and some of the others, it seems, according to AP, that Atlanta was also supposed to be a target in one way or